Okay, tonight we continue reading Zac Power Mind Games. We're up to chapter 7. It was the weirdest thing Zac had ever seen. It was shaped like a normal games console, but where the left, right, up and down buttons should have been, this thing had wires hanging out. Attached to the end of the wires was a shiny metal helmet. It looked like a high-tech version of Zac's mum's colander. Zac dug out his spy pad and snapped off a digital photo. Then he emailed a copy through to tech support back to GIB Mission Control. If there was anyone nerdy enough to know what this was, it was Leon. A few seconds later, Zac's spy pad rang. "That's MindLab's latest console, the Mind Game 3000, said Leon, sounding like he was about to pop with excitement. "What does it do?" asked Zac. "It's like an ordinary games console, but instead of pressing buttons, you think your next move. You can control any computer game just with your mind." It sounded cool, but it wasn't going to lead Zac to the hackers. Leon was carrying on about the Mind Game 3000. "This is totally amazing. They're not even out on the market yet," Leon was saying as Zac hung up. Zac found a door and trailed dolefully out of the basement. He'd never let a mission defeat him before, but this time, with no real leads, he had no idea what to do next. He checked his watch. 4:23 a.m. Time was running out. Out in the alley, Zac hopped on his karaoke hover scooter. He was about to roar off when something caught his eye. It was a poster. "Games Convention, Bladesville Town Hall. Try out the coolest gaming technology. Open 24 hours. Sponsored by MindLab." Zac's spy senses zinged. If the hackers owned a games console that wasn't even in the shops yet, wasn't it possible they'd be involved in a games convention? Zac was going to find out. He zoomed through the streets of Bladesville towards the town hall. Engaging hover mode, he leapt over rubbish bins and the occasional dog. In less than 10 minutes, Zac was there. Zac stopped the hover scooter near the front entrance and raced inside. Almost immediately, he felt a hand clamp down on his shoulder. "Excuse me, sir." Zac turned and saw a man in a black suit and dark sunglasses smiling grimly. "Me?" asked Zac as innocently as he could. He had to look like an ordinary games-mad kid, not the super spy he was. "Congratulations," said the man in a strange voice. "You've won a wild card entry into our grand games battle. The best gamers in the world are going head-to-head live on the big screen." No thanks. I'd rather just look around the convention," said Zac. There were hundreds of kids milling around. The hackers were in there somewhere. Zac could feel it. He couldn't afford to waste time in some stupid games competition. "But you've been selected by MindLab, the world's most advanced gaming company. What normal kid would pass up a chance like that?" asked the man, his eyes narrowing. "You are a normal kid, right?" "Oh, totally normal," said Zac hastily. "Well then, step this way." The man slapped a red MindLab baseball cap onto Zac's head and shoved him towards the stage. 2 monitors and 2 game consoles sat waiting for the players. Overhead, a giant screen had been rigged up so everyone at the convention could see who was playing and how they were scoring. "You know how to play Flight Night, right?" said the man. "It's a flight simulator game." Zac shrugged. He had some experience with flight simulators. More than most of his opponents, it seemed. One by one, Zac clobbered every challenger. It was easy, almost too easy, thought Zac. Was someone letting him win? Pretty soon, Zac found himself in the semi-finals, leading by 1 point as the siren sounded. He'd made the grand final. Zac checked his watch. 7:37 a.m. Playing in the grand final would take up more time, but even worse, the 8-year-old kid he'd been playing in the semis burst into tears. Hey, don't cry," said Zac. "There's always next year." The kid nodded, not convinced. He pulled his blue MindLab baseball cap down lower to hide his tears. The poor kid was a total flight night addict. That was obvious. Zac gazed up at the big screen above their heads. On the screen, all you could really see of the players was the backs of their heads. Maybe. "I've got an idea," said Zac casually. "I'm kind of in a hurry. Could you do me a favour and take my spot in the grand final?" The kid's eyes lit up. "You wear my red cap, I'll wear your blue one. On the big screen, it'll look like it's me playing instead of you," said Zac. "Leaving me free to look for the hackers," Zac added silently to himself. Sneaky, sneaky. Chapter 8. Zac leapt off the stage. Straight away, the crowd swallowed him up. He was safe, at least, for the moment. He thought over everything Leon told him about the mind-controlled games console that hackers left behind. It was made by MindLab. Zac found the MindLab display here at the games convention. There was a good chance the hackers would be somewhere nearby. It wasn't hard to spot. Over in the corner, an enormous blinking neon sign read, "MindLab, tomorrow's gaming today." Zac headed over. MindLab had set up rows of computers so everyone at the convention could try their games and equipment. A thrill rushed through Zac. Every kid at every computer at the MindLab display was wearing a high-tech metal helmet. They were testing the MindLab 3000 console. The hackers must be very close now. But where? Zac needed to hang back for a while and watch. But it was already 8:01 a.m., less than an hour until the firewall was breached. The MindLab display was the most popular stand by far. Kid after kid stepped up to try out the new mind-controlled console. That made sense. Who wouldn't want to try out something so awesome? All the same, Zac couldn't help thinking how rich a company like MindLab must be. But to keep the money rolling in, thought Zac, you need to keep kids addicted to their games. Computer games were definitely fun, but there was also something a little bit creepy about the way they sucked you in. Suddenly, Zac noticed something strange. When a kid made a very high score, a man in a black suit and dark sunglasses would appear from nowhere. The man would whisper something in the kid's ear and the two of them would disappear through a door. As Zac watched, it happened at least 3 times. Where were the men taking the games champs? And what were they whispering? Zac dug out his trusty spy pad. He switched it on and stuck in a pair of headphones. The spy pad had a high-powered multi-directional microphone feature. Zac could hear almost anything, even the softest whisper, from about 50 metres away. Sneaking over to the MindLab display, Zac pointed his spy pad at one of the men in black suits. The man leant down towards a kid on one of the computers. "Hey, you're pretty good at that game," the man said. The kid hardly looked up. "My name's Tate," said the man, sticking out his hand. "How'd you like to join me with MindLab? We're hiring champion gamers for an interesting project we're working on. We pay good money." That got the kid's attention. He nodded, stood up and walked off with Mr. Tate. Zac followed along behind, as close as he dared. Mr. Tate and the kid disappeared through a door that said private. Zac crouched down behind a pot plant and listened closely. The spy pad's microphone was so powerful Zac could hear everything the man said, even through even through a closed door. MindLab is so much more than a gaming company, Mr. Tate was saying. The technology we invent for games, we also use for much bigger things, like satellites. Satellites? Zac's face flushed with excitement. He was about to crack this case. He could feel it. "At the moment, we're trying to discover how a particularly powerful satellite called World Eye works," Mr. Tate said. "Since you're so good with MindLab 3000, we thought you'd be able to help. We use the same controls for our World Eye project, you see." So the kids on the other side of the door would be joining a group of kids recruited by MindLab to hack into World Eye using the MindLab 3000. The hackers Zac followed in the karaoke bar were too. The plan was ingenious. Develop top-level hacking technology and disguise it as an ordinary games console, then recruit the best gamers and pay them lots of money for their silence. No one would ever suspect kids would be the brains behind a plot as big as hacking into World Eye. Just then, the kid on the other side of the door asked Mr. Tate a question. "I thought that satellite belonged to someone else," the kid said. Zac held his breath. What would Mr. Tate say to that? There was a long silence. Then Zac heard the faintest sound. Even with a powerful spy-pad microphone, it was almost too quiet to hear. It was a cross between a sob and a whimper of pain. Zac's blood ran cold. Zac heard Mr. Tate's cruel voice. "When you work for MindLab, you don't ever ask questions. Now you know why." Pins and needles prickled Zac's legs. He was going to cramp up if he didn't move soon. He shifted a millimetre to his left, but it was enough. A voice called out, "Over there! Behind the pot plant!" Oh no! One of the kids from the karaoke bar had spotted Zac. Before he could run, Zac was surrounded. Zac recognised the man from the front entrance, the one who'd forced him to enter the games comp. He saw all the kids from the karaoke bar, as well as those kids. There were a whole lot of goons he hadn't met yet. There was no escaping this one. "I know someone very keen to meet you," said the man from the front entrance in his creepy voice. He grabbed Zac roughly by the arm. "The head of Mind Lab, Jimmy Shady." What a name, Jimmy Shady. Chapter 9. Zac looked around for help. Surely there'd be security guards at the games convention. Surely they wouldn't just let a whole lot of goons march him away in broad daylight. But then Zac remembered Mind Lab was sponsoring the games convention. If there were security guards, they worked for Mind Lab. They'd be no help at all. Zac needed a plan. But at the rate the goons were dragging him through the hall, there wasn't much time to come up with one. He'd have to think something up on the spot. "This way," said the man from the front entrance, yanking Zac towards the glass office overlooking the entire convention centre. Magically, the door slid aside. There at the desk was a very short, very ugly man. His thin hair was scraped back against his skull with a shiny hair gel. His skin was clammy and pocked like a toad's. The ugly man stood up and nodded politely. It was like he and Zac were about to sit down to a friendly game of chess. "Before I kill you," said the ugly man, "let me introduce myself." Zac knew that a spy must never show fear, even when his stomach was flip-flopping wildly. "I'm Jimmy Shady," said the man. "Take a seat. I'll tell you all about my operation." When he was a kid, Jimmy Shady would have been the last one picked for the footy team, the one who never got invited to anyone's birthday party, the one who ate his lunch all by himself. Now Zac could tell Jimmy Shady felt important at last, and he couldn't wait to tell Zac exactly how powerful he really was. In fact, Jimmy Shady was so thrilled with himself, his eyes misted over. He didn't even notice Zac switching on his iPod. That suited Zac just fine. "Being a GIB spy, you've no doubt worked out I'm recruiting games whizzes to help me hack into your precious World Eye satellite." Zac nodded. "Why would you want to hack into World Eye? You're head of a games company, not an international spy," Zac said. The more Jimmy Shady told him, the better. "Once I control World Eye, I'll be able to spy on stupid kids like the ones out there. I'll be able to find out what they like and don't like. That way, I'll get them all hooked on even more of my super addictive games." "How close are you to controlling World Eye?" asked Zac. "One line of computer code away." Jimmy Shady consulted his notes. "We know the second last line is H equals //T plus 13, but we haven't cracked the last line yet. The kids I've recruited today are going to doing tests right now." Zac said nothing. "Untold riches will be mine, and the funniest part is I'm using the kids themselves to get even more kids hooked on my games." Jimmy Shady laughed an evil laugh. "Ha ha ha." It was all Zac needed to hear. As casually as he could, Zac stretched his arm up. Just the way he'd planned it, something rolled down his sleeve and into his hand. A stink bomb. Zac always kept one up his sleeve, just in case. It wasn't anything clever or high-tech, but as Zac was learning, sometimes the old-fashioned gadgets are the best. With all his might, Zac chucked the stink bomb at the wall. A stink bomb, hey? It exploded. Instantly, the room was filled with gas. Jimmy Shady coughed and spluttered. So did his goons. The gas smelt worse than 10,000 dog farts. Zac sprang to his feet. Before anyone knew what was happening, he'd raced out the door. He'd managed to secretly record Jimmy Shady admitting his evil plan on the mini video camera in his iPod. Zac had all the evidence he needed to arrest Jimmy and stop the hackers cracking the final line of computer code. But how, in a room crawling with Mind Lab goons, could one 12-year-old arrest the head of Mind Lab? How can he? Chapter 10. Zac tore through the Games convention towards the main stage. With all those monitors and equipment on the stage, the next part of his plan would be easy. As quick as lightning, Zac plugged his iPod into the video-in jack of one giant screen. Zac hit play. Suddenly, Jimmy Shady's voice boomed through the Bladesville town hall. Everyone stopped what they were doing and looked up. Zac was broadcasting Jimmy Shady's confession for the entire convention to hear. "Untold riches will be mine, and the funniest part is I'm using the kids themselves to get even more kids hooked on my games," Jimmy Shady said. All across the hall, kids started talking to each other. "Hear that? The head of Mind Lab's been messing with gamers. Let's get him and the hackers," Zac heard someone yell. Like a boiling pot about to overflow, the convention erupted. Kids shouted, games consoles flew through the air. It was chaos. The gamers stormed Jimmy Shady's glass office. Within moments he was captured, handcuffed, and the police were called. Soon he was driven away in a police car. Zac's plan had worked perfectly. His mission was complete thanks to the kids. Suddenly, Zac heard his spy pad beep. "Item received 9:01 a.m. Come straight home once your Bladesville mission's complete. Tonight's rubbish night and it's your turn to put out the bins. Message from Agent Bum Smack Mum." Agent Bum Smack Mum. Oh. He'd have to hurry if he was going to make it home in time to put the bins out. But how on earth would he get there? His invisible fighter jet had been stolen by the hackers. There just wasn't time to search for it. Zac paced up and down outside Jimmy Shady's office. It was empty now, sealed off with black and yellow crime scene tape. There was something on the floor, though, something that looked like, yes, car keys. When no one was looking, Zac grabbed the keys. He wasn't going to steal Jimmy Shady's car, more like borrow it, just to drive himself to Bladesville Airport so he could get a flight home. There was always his karaoke hover scooter, but somehow Zac suspected Jimmy Shady would have something much faster, much cooler he could use. Zac raced to the car park outside the town hall. There were hundreds of cars parked there. Which one was Jimmy Shady's? A remote unlocking device dangled from the keyring. Zac hit the blipper. He heard the sound of a vehicle door unlocking, but Zac couldn't see which car was unlocking its door and flashing its lights. Zac tried the remote over and over, but not one of the cars seemed to be opening. What is going on? Zac looked around him in frustration. It was then that he saw it. There was a helipad on the roof of the town hall with a brand new ultralight stealth helicopter parked and waiting. Zac tried the remote once again. The helicopter's lights came on. The door opened. He'd found his ride home. As Zac ran towards the helipad, a brief doubt flickered through his mind. He'd never actually flown a helicopter before. Then again, in the past 24 hours, he'd piloted a fighter jet, won a gaming comp, hooned around on a hover scooter, sung karaoke, and busted Jimmy Shady. "I reckon I can handle a helicopter," thought Zac to himself. The end.